Hey Shoreline, it's Pastor Dave. I wanted to give you an update on 157 Green Street, the property that we've been looking at for the last month or two and that many of you have visited. You can see this is part one. There are going to be two parts here, one this week and one next week, and that's because there's just a lot of information and I wanted to make it digestible for everyone. The first update is on our timeline. Like we announced last Sunday, our original plan was to have a family meeting on January 29th so that the congregation could meet and discuss the property. And then we could have set a vote for as early as the next week for February the 5th. However, we can't stay with that timeline, and that's because another offer has already come in on the property. And the seller isn't willing to wait until February to receive our offer. So if we're going to give Shoreline the opportunity to say yes or no to this property, it means we have to advance our timeline. And so they've agreed to the 29th. If we can vote on the 29th, then they'll wait until that date to allow us to deliberate on it. And so that means we would be then pushing up our family meeting date to the 22nd. That said, let's start by asking again why it is that we are looking for a new location. We've been well served by the Holiday Inn for the last 7 years. It's allowed us to faithfully gather for worship and serve together, and we can continue to do that. That remains an option, is to stay here at the Holiday Inn indefinitely. As we continue, though, to run into constraints on space for Shoreline kids and the desire to do ministry together throughout the week in other ways than community groups, we might decide that moving to a better rental facility makes sense for us. And so that would look like something that has better secondary spaces or is open to us more during the week than the Holiday Inn. Option 3 is what we're looking at right now. With 157 Green Street, and that's buying an existing building and renovating it. In the past, that's mostly looked like us looking at spaces like a warehouse or something along those lines that was not originally designed as a house of worship and retrofitting it to our use. This is the first time that we're considering a piece of property that was originally built as a house of worship. And option 4 is what we were looking at last year with the property in Quaker Hill, and that was buying land and building on it. And each of these includes some risk. All of the rental options, the risk is that you don't know if the rent will remain affordable or that it will be available indefinitely. We've run into space constraints, and there aren't obvious next choices for us, and we have difficulty doing midweek ministry. So that's why Shoreline has been looking at new property for the last several years. Now, facility ownership may be a good choice for Shoreline, but ownership, again, is not winning. We haven't failed if we don't purchase a piece of property. And so we want to set that clear expectation out front. It's not a do or die thing that Shoreline purchase a building or this building. We're simply offering ourselves this opportunity. And so many of the congregation took advantage of looking at this opportunity and visited the Green Street property. And among the many pros and cons, here is sort of a synthesized, summarized version of the pros and cons that many of you reported in your site evaluations. The location is a benefit. It will also be a con in some ways as well, but the location has a lot of upsides. It's close to our present meeting spot, so moving there won't displace anyone who currently worships with us. The location is very visible to the community. It's accessible, and it's also very near to the heart of the community. Those are all benefits of its location. Its size, it fits our current congregation size with room for some growth. The building is undeniably beautiful, and there's something to that. Not only is it beautiful, but it's also historic, and so it has a cultural significance and a history in the town, the city of New London, and moving to this location would allow us to be participants in the revitalization of downtown New London, which is a beneficial thing. is, again, also purpose built as a house of worship, which makes it a lot easier for us to utilize as a church building. Its proximity to public parking is really helpful. Um, it's something that we don't have to pay to pave, to plow, to maintain, to restripe a parking lot if we choose this location. There are roughly, I think it's 150 spots in the two lots that are right there across the street from it. The building, once it was renovated, will probably be very low maintenance because of the type of construction that it is. The purchase price is a very attractive purchase price. The list is $375. That's the asking price that the seller is asking of us. And the timeline of a project like this is also very attractive. When we were looking at buying land and building at like the Mohegan Avenue property up in Quaker Hill, that property to do all of the site work, do all the permitting, do all of the building is a multi-year process, probably something like 5 years. And just think about the age of all the kids at Shoreline Kids right now. How old will they all be in 5 years? And some of us really like the idea of the timeline of an existing building with respect to that then, because we then have something that's more like a 1 year process to get done. And so this property would get us into a new church building much faster than some of the other alternatives. When Shoreline visited 157 Green Street, you identified, as well as the pros, some cons, and many of them are the flip side of some of the pros. So a lot of things like having high visibility, it's a double-edged sword. It comes with traffic and the potential difficulty of crossing that street. Another double-edged sword, there's minimal groundskeeping with this property. But that means also that there's no room for expansion. It also means that there's no room for outdoor meetings or play spaces. There are potential safety concerns not only with the traffic, but of the surrounding neighborhood. We don't know how much it will cost at this point to renovate the building. We know for sure that there are probably mold and lead and asbestos issues associated with it, and we don't yet know how much those will cost. More on that particular thing next week in the second update. One potential con associated with this property is that public parking might be unreliable. Now, certainly on particular weeks, like a Sailfest week, we know that there might be a significant parking burden. Though if you've been downtown to Sailfest on a Sunday morning, you know that it is quite light. However, public parking might not be free to us forever. And while that's still quite a bit less expensive than building and maintaining and plowing a parking lot of our own, it is something to keep in mind. The proximity of this building to other churches is also something of concern. It's one thing that we're meeting downtown in the midst of other churches in a rented facility while we're looking for the long-term solution. But some of us are concerned perhaps that it's the long-term proximity to so many other churches is a downside of this property. And the potential for historic registry constraints. This building is on a historic register, and so there are, and we are currently investigating what exactly the constraints are, especially though since we are intending to restore it to its original use. We don't anticipate enormous challenges in that area, but there will be further updates on that next week as we have more information to give you. On the evaluation survey that we sent out to everyone who visited the property, we asked towards the end sort of a summary question. And it said, if it's determined that Shoreline could feasibly fund the purchase and renovation of this property, would you encourage the congregation to pursue it? And it's sort of the thumbs up, thumbs down kind of question. And roughly 35% said yes, that's the blue on this chart. Roughly 13 said no, that's the red. And combined, the green and the yellow are two kind of different categories of unsure. And so that's roughly 52% of those who visited the property were in that category. Now, we were able to look at the unsure group and the rest of their answers. And most of you who answered that you weren't certain about the property were generally positive towards it in the rest of your responses, but you had questions about its condition, its size, or how we would use it, which means that overall, a majority of those Shoreline members who did visit the property believe that it could potentially be a good fit for us. And based on that majority evaluation and the specific pros that we've identified, the elders think that Shoreline really could take advantage of the opportunities that this building offers while we try to mitigate the downsides. And that's why we're encouraging the congregation to consider it and potentially vote on it. Now, there remain, especially like you see, the majority opinion here is kind of uncertain. We need more information. That there are a number of questions regarding the building, its location, its condition, its renovation costs, how many people we can fit in it and how we can use it. And then also on the ministry side, what impact would this have on things like Shoreline Kids, and what kinds of ministries are we trying to do in a building like this, in a location like this? And so the second update, the one that we are going to send next week, is going to dive into those questions, answering those questions so that everyone can arrive at the family meeting, which will now be on January the 22nd, and be able to really participate, be prepared for participating. And so that's what to expect next week, and then in the following weeks. A family meeting on the 22nd, and then a vote on the 29th, so that we can give the congregation the opportunity to say yes or to say no.